My name is Rosalind. I am 35 years old, an ordinary high school teacher. Maybe the story I am about to tell will leave many people speechless. On my daughter Clara's 8th birthday, while the whole room was joyfully singing, my mother-in-law, Marjorie, suddenly stood up, grabbed the 3-tier unicorn cake I had stayed up all night making, and threw it straight into the trash. She coldly declared, "A child with C grades does not deserve a birthday party." In that moment, joy turned into a nightmare. My daughter choked back tears as she watched the cake crushed among garbage, while my husband didn't dare say a word. Have you ever witnessed a family member destroy your child's happiness? If it were you, how would you react? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so I can share the rest of the story, where the truth slowly comes to light. Many people might look at my family and think I am lucky. A gentle husband, a well-behaved daughter, and a little home in the suburbs of Portland. But if you had lived in this house for 10 years like I have, you would know there is always a shadow hanging over us. The shadow of Marjorie, my mother-in-law. Daniel, my husband, is a kind man. He listens, he shares, and he has never once raised his voice at me. I love that gentleness. But that gentleness also means he is always silent in front of his mother. From the very first day Daniel proposed, I could see it in her eyes. Marjorie looked me up and down, then turned to her son with disdain. "A teacher? You think that's all your life is worth? You should marry someone with status, someone who can elevate you." I still remember Daniel squeezing my hand, softly answering, "I love Rosalind. And that's what matters most." But instead of giving us her blessing, she forced a smile, her eyes filled with disappointment. I thought time would soften her heart. I was wrong. When Clara was born, everything only grew worse. Marjorie never once acknowledged me as the mother of the child. She always acted as if Clara were her own property, needing to be raised her way. When Clara was only 5, she made her sit at the piano for 3 hours every day. Clara was still so little, her tiny fingers aching, tears dripping onto the keys. I held my daughter close, protesting, "Mom, she's too young. Let her play, let her grow naturally." But Marjorie cut me off. "Children don't need play. They need discipline. Play makes them weak." Clara loved drawing. She would sit for hours coloring butterflies, flowers, or drawing me in my favorite blue dress. I still keep those messy little drawings. They carried the joy and imagination of childhood. But when Clara brought one to show her grandmother, Marjorie glanced at it and said coldly, "Worthless. If it's not useful, don't waste time on it." I saw Clara's eyes fall, her small hand crumpling the paper before quietly tossing it into the trash. I wanted to speak up, but Daniel gently tugged my hand and whispered, "Don't argue with Mom. She'll get angry." One night, I couldn't hold it in and confronted my husband in our bedroom after a long day of being criticized by his mother. "Daniel, don't you see? Clara's hurting. She's so afraid of her grandmother she doesn't dare speak. And I can't keep living like this, being treated as a useless mother." He lowered his head, rubbing his temple, his voice fading. "She's old, she means well." I choked up. "Means well?" If she meant well, why did every word cut into my daughter's heart like a knife? Years passed, and Marjorie's interference only grew more suffocating. She nitpicked every little thing. The way I folded blankets, cooked meals, even what dress Clara wore to school. Once, when I packed Clara's lunch with a peanut butter sandwich and some apple slices, she looked at it and sneered. "You call this lunch? Children need real nutrition, not scraps. She'll grow up weak and slow." Clara sat beside us, quietly pushing the lunchbox further away. My hand tightened around the kitchen knife as I fought to stay calm. Every time, it wasn't me she belittled. She made Clara believe I wasn't good enough to care for her. On some nights, I saw Clara writing in her little notebook. When I asked, she smiled and said it was writing practice. But once, when she fell asleep, I opened it. On the ink-stained page were scrawled words. "Today Grandma said I'm stupid. She said I'm not like Dad because he's smart, but I'm like Mom, so I'm useless." I wish Dad heard it, but he only smiled at her and stayed silent. I cried in the dark, clutching the tiny notebook to my chest. Whenever I tried to talk to Daniel, he avoided it. Sometimes he sighed, "You don't understand. Mom lived her whole life by discipline. She believes that's right. I've tried to talk to her, but she won't change." "You've never really tried. You keep quiet. And your quietness is making our daughter believe Grandma is right." But Daniel turned away like always. Marjorie had a special way of turning every joy into a burden. One summer afternoon, Clara won third place in a school art contest. She proudly carried home the certificate, her eyes sparkling. I took a photo with her, planning to frame it and hang it in the living room. But when Marjorie saw it, she scoffed. Third place? That means 2 kids or better. Why throw a party for a failure? Clara froze. She stuffed the certificate in a drawer and never mentioned the contest again. That night, I sat beside her whispering, "Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. Third place or first doesn't matter. What matters is that you dared to try and did something you love." Clara hugged me and whispered, "But why does Grandma always say I'm not good enough? She said Dad would be disappointed." I swallowed hard, not knowing how to answer. 10 years have passed. I live with a kind but weak husband, and a mother-in-law who sees me as a thorn in her side. Every time I think about fighting back, I see Daniel's weary, defeated eyes. Clara once asked me, "Mom, if I study harder, will Grandma love me?" I held her tightly, my heart aching. An 8-year-old should be thinking about dolls and candy, not wondering if she is good enough to be loved. And in those nights, I knew things couldn't go on like this anymore. But I never imagined that the one who would change everything wasn't me. It was Clara, the little girl Marjorie always looked down on. Clara began changing before my eyes in ways any mother could feel, even if no one else noticed. The door stayed quiet when I returned, and the butterflies she used to draw for me disappeared too. Instead, she grew cautious, quiet, as if bracing herself to never make a mistake. Whenever Marjorie came over, Clara would retreat into a corner, pretending to read or color, her eyes always shadowed with worry. When her grandmother barked, "Sit up straight. Don't fidget. Don't laugh too much," I saw Clara memorizing it all as if every word were a heavy sentence. At night, when I checked on her, I often found Clara scribbling in her little purple notebook. One night, I gently pulled it closer after she fell asleep. On the smudged page, the shaky words read, "Today Grandma said I'm lazy. She said I'm not smart. I wish Dad could see." A few weeks later, I discovered Clara wasn't only writing. She was secretly using her iPad to record conversations with her grandmother. That day, while cleaning her room, I found dozens of files in the voice memo folder. Marjorie's voice rang out crystal clear in one of them. "This girl is slow like her mother. Nothing special at all." In the background, I heard Clara take a deep breath, trying to hold it in. Every word from Marjorie was like a cold knife piercing my heart. But what shocked me even more was how Clara had quietly recorded every moment. That night, I sat by her bed and gently asked, "Clara, why did you do this?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. "Because Dad doesn't believe you. Every time you tell him, he says Grandma doesn't mean it. I want to show him the truth. I want him to hear it himself." I hugged her tightly, my heart aching with both love and sorrow. I whispered, "You don't have to prove anything. You deserve love simply because you are you." But Clara shook her head, her voice fading. "Without proof, Dad will never take our side." That sentence haunted me for days. Marjorie still came to the house as usual, and I began paying closer attention to Clara's every reaction. Whenever her grandmother criticized her, Clara no longer cried. Instead, she said nothing, her hand brushing the iPad nearby, as if to make sure everything was being saved. One afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, I heard Marjorie's voice ring out from the living room. "Clara, sit up straight. Children from decent families don't slouch like that." Then Clara's timid voice followed. "Yes, Grandma." I stepped out and saw Clara close her book, quietly setting the iPad on the table like she had completed a mission. That night, when I tucked her into bed, Clara grabbed my hand and whispered, "Mom, don't tell anyone. This is our secret. When the time comes, I'll show Dad." In that moment, she seemed so small, yet so grown, bearing a weight she never should have carried. In the days that followed, she watched more closely, listened more intently, as if quietly collecting puzzle pieces to complete the picture. Marjorie remained unaware. She sat comfortably in her armchair, delivering sharp remarks, not knowing that every word was being clearly recorded by her granddaughter. Once after Marjorie left, I asked, "Aren't you tired, Clara? Doesn't this make you sad?" Clara looked at me, a faint smile appearing. "Of course I'm sad. But I know I'm doing the right thing. You taught me that when someone bullies you, you shouldn't stay silent." Yes, I had taught her to stand up to bullies. But I never imagined that the bully would be her own grandmother, and that my little girl would have to find her own way to protect herself. One night, as I kissed Clara goodnight, she whispered, Mom, I know Grandma will be very angry if she finds out. But I'm not scared. What I'm scared of is that Dad won't believe it even when he hears it. I squeezed her hand and whispered, there will come a time when Dad has to face the truth, Clara. And then you won't have to prove anything anymore. But deep inside, I knew the fire had already been lit. And soon, it would erupt into a blaze no one could put out. Marjorie never knew when to stop. If before it was only criticism, now she started interfering directly in our finances. One afternoon when I came home from work, I found her sitting in the kitchen with Daniel, a stack of bank papers in front of them. Her voice was firm. You need to open a separate account in your name. Call it a savings fund for Clara. A decent man always prepares for his child's future. Daniel nodded, too afraid to object. I walked in, set my bag on the table and asked directly, a savings fund for Clara? Why have I never heard about this? Marjorie glanced at me, her eyes cold as if I had intruded on something that didn't concern me. Because this is between Daniel and my granddaughter. You wouldn't understand. Do you really think your teacher's salary can secure Clara's future? I froze. Those words didn't just deny me as a mother. They made me feel like an outsider in my own family. From that day, I noticed more and more decisions were made without me. From choosing Clara's tutoring classes to buying insurance, even fixing the roof. Whenever I asked, Daniel mumbled, I thought Mom had more experience, so it's fine to listen to her. I felt myself being pushed further out of the circle, watching my husband and mother-in-law make decisions together. Clara, unintentionally, was also drawn into it. Some nights, I heard her whisper, Mom, Grandma said Dad will take better care of me. I hugged her tightly, speechless, not knowing how to convince her of my love. The breaking point came one rainy night. Daniel went out to buy a few groceries, leaving Marjorie behind. I was about to tuck Clara into bed when I heard Marjorie's voice from the living room, clear through the phone. If Daniel is smart, he'll divorce Rosalind and take Clara to live with me. He deserves a better wife, someone who can help him advance, not some small, useless woman who adds no value. I froze behind the door, my heart pounding as if it would explode. I gripped the stair rail to keep from collapsing. Those words were the final knife, cutting away any hope I had that she might one day accept me. When Daniel came home, I told him immediately, my voice shaking. I heard it myself, Daniel. She said you should leave me. She wants to take Clara. He shook his head, set the bag down and sighed, you must have misheard. Mom didn't mean it. She exaggerates sometimes. She doesn't really think that way. I stared at him, tears streaming down my face. You think I made it up? You think I'd want to hurt myself by imagining something so cruel? Daniel avoided my eyes, his voice weary. You're too sensitive. Mom was joking, you know her. I let go, feeling like I had fallen into a bottomless pit. The man I trusted, the one I thought would be my strength, had chosen to turn away instead of facing the truth. That night, I lay beside Clara, listening to her steady breaths, my heart breaking. She had no idea her grandmother was plotting to take her away from me. And worse, her father, my husband, dismissed it all as just a joke. From then on, the distance between Daniel and me only grew. Every time I brought up his mother, he either kept quiet or changed the subject. I became the paranoid one in his eyes, while Marjorie walked freely into my home as if it belonged to her. One evening at dinner, she set down her chopsticks and said straight to our faces, Daniel, have you thought about letting Clara live with me more often? My house is spacious, with room for study and peace. Rosalind is busy teaching. How could she manage the child properly? Daniel stammered, but before he could answer, I slammed my spoon down. Clara is my daughter. I don't need anyone else to manage her. She smirked, her eyes gleaming with challenge. We'll see. Who really gets to keep the girl? Clara sat frozen, her eyes wide, her hands clenched under the table. I saw in her gaze both fear and determination. From that day, I knew I wasn't up against a controlling mother-in-law, that I was in an invisible battle that could steal my daughter from my arms at any moment. One evening, as I folded laundry in my room, Clara walked in with her little notebook in hand, her eyes shining, but her voice unusually steady. Mom, I want to tell you something, but you have to promise not to be angry, not to stop me. I set the folded clothes down, looking at her seriously. Go ahead, I promise to listen. Clara pressed her lips together, then whispered as if afraid someone might overhear. I'm working on a project for the Justice Club at school. It's called a special project. Justice Club? Your school has that. She nodded, pulling her iPad from under the pillow and clutching it to her chest. Actually, I've recorded a lot of things, Grandma said. Not just the other day, but for a long time now. A flood of questions ran through my mind. Why should a child have to do that in secret? Did she understand the consequences? My voice trembled. What did you record? Clara unlocked the screen, rows of audio files scrolling endlessly, making me feel suffocated. She tapped one short clip. Marjorie's sharp voice filled the air. This girl really is damaged goods. Bad genes from her mother. Nothing to be proud of. Daniel is a fool for putting up with a wife like that. I covered my mouth with my hand, afraid my sobs would hurt her even more. But Clara only looked at me, her eyes stronger than her age. I pulled her into my arms, my heart breaking yet also igniting with something unnamed. Sweetheart, you're too young to carry this burden. This is adult business, not your responsibility. But Clara shook her head, her clear eyes shining. But it's my business too. Grandma makes me sad, makes you sad. If I don't do anything, it'll always stay this way. Looking at her, I saw a reflection of myself long ago, the first time I realized some adults never change no matter how hard you try. But I never had Clara's courage. What do you want to do with all these recordings? I asked. Clara opened a separate folder and the screen showed the title, The Most Important Woman in My Life. I want to make a video. A documentary project like my teachers taught us about storytelling with truth. But the main character will be Grandma. My chest tightened. That title sounded like praise, but I could see behind it a quiet act of defiance. I swallowed hard. Who do you plan to show this video to? To Dad and to everyone if I have to. I want people to see what Grandma has really taught me. I was torn. Part of me wanted to protect her from this storm. But another part saw in her eyes a determination that wasn't childish recklessness. It was a conscious choice. I sighed, pulling her into my arms. All right. If you truly want this, I'll help you. But we must do it carefully so no one knows until the right time. Clara smiled, a smile that lifted a heavy weight off her shoulders. I knew you'd understand. From that day, my daughter and I shared a secret. At night, after Daniel went to sleep, we sat in the small study with the old laptop. Clara carefully chose each recording, cutting and arranging. I showed her how to add text, adjust the volume, insert images. Sometimes Clara played a clip and Grandma's voice cut through the air. Rosalind is a burden. My son deserves a much better life. This part should go at the beginning. That way everyone will know what Grandma really thinks. My little girl was learning how to turn pain into evidence, hurt into a weapon of truth. One night I asked softly, Clara, aren't you scared? If Grandma finds out, she'll be furious. She gave a small, bitter smile, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She's always been furious, Mom. This time I want her to be furious because of the truth. Day by day the video took shape. Clara named each section, Grandma's lessons, what I learned, when family stayed silent. In each part she didn't use recordings, she added images. The crumpled drawings, the piano where she sat hunched in practice, even pages from her diary. One evening when we were almost finished, Clara looked up and asked, Mom, do you think I'm wrong? Recording secretly, it feels like a forbidden secret. I held her hand, my voice shaky but firm. You're not wrong. You're protecting yourself and protecting me. Sometimes, when the truth has been buried too long, someone has to be brave enough to bring it into the light. Clara nodded, then put on her headphones and kept editing. Her small figure in the desk lamp's glow felt like a tiny warrior had appeared in our home. After many nights, the video was finally complete. Clara watched it from start to finish, her eyes shining, her little hand resting on mine. Mom, now we have proof. When the time comes, no one can say you made it up anymore. In that moment, I knew we had crossed a line. We were no longer silent sufferers. A month after the ruined birthday cake, I thought Marjorie would avoid us or at least lessen her presence in my home. But no, she came back stronger, carrying a new plan. One Saturday morning, Daniel poured his coffee, the doorbell rang. Marjorie appeared with a fake smile and a list in her hand. We need to host a big family gathering, she said as if giving orders, not even asking me. Relatives, old friends, some former colleagues. I want everyone to see that Clara is being raised properly, not like the rumors going around. I looked at Daniel, hoping he would refuse. But he froze, his face tired. Mom, is it really necessary? Clara's too young. She doesn't need the pressure of a party. Marjorie cut him off sharply. What do you know? She needs to show the world she's not weak. More importantly, everyone must see this family is strong with no discord. I heard the sarcasm in every word, no discord. She wanted to cover everything up, to turn my home into the stage for her perfect play. Daniel reluctantly agreed. After she left, he sighed. I don't want this, but if we refuse, she'll make a scene. Maybe we just endure one day and it'll be over. That night, Clara whispered beside me, This will be our day, Mom. This time Grandma will have to hear the truth. I stroked her hair, my heart pounding. My little girl was preparing for a battle no child should face. Yet Clara was full of faith, and all I could do was stand beside her. In the days before the party, our home turned into a silent battlefield. Marjorie came constantly, inspecting every detail. She sneered at the tablecloth I chose as cheap, forcing me to replace it with the lace she brought. I planned a simple menu of roast chicken and salad, but she dismissed it and called in her own chef to prepare a proper dinner. Rosalind, you know nothing about hosting, she said bitterly. If you were in charge, people would laugh at us. I clenched my fists, ready to argue, but Clara stood nearby, signaling me. Don't worry. Let her have her way. Daniel withdrew further each day, hiding in the garage or running errands for hours. When I confronted him, he said, I don't want to fight with Mom anymore. Let her have her fun day, then things will settle down. The day of the party arrived. From early morning, Marjorie was there with her guest list, barking orders at the servers she had hired. Guests streamed in. Distant relatives I had never met, her old banking friends, even a few local officials. All were welcomed by Marjorie's proud smile. I wore a simple blue dress, while Clara wore the purple dress her grandmother had chosen, but I let her wear the butterfly clip we had made together. A small sign of resistance. The house buzzed with laughter and chatter. But I felt like a shadow pushed aside. When a woman asked me, Oh, and who are you? Before I could answer, Marjorie interjected, This is Rosalind, Daniel's wife. But you know, Daniel is really the one who raised Clara so well. I bit my lip, holding back. Clara stood nearby, her eyes flashing before she quickly turned away. When the party reached its peak, Marjorie stood, tapping her wine glass, her voice ringing with pride. I want to thank everyone for being here today. As you can see, my granddaughter Clara has grown into a well-mannered girl, properly raised, and she will achieve even greater things in the future. Everyone clapped. Daniel sat beside me, forcing a smile. I gripped Clara's hand tightly under the table. She turned to me, whispering so softly it was almost inaudible. It's time. Clara stood up, her clear voice ringing out. I also have a special gift for Grandma and for everyone. I prepared a video. All eyes turned to the 8-year-old girl standing in the center of the party, small but filled with determination. Marjorie smiled, thinking this would be a tribute to her. Oh, let's see what my granddaughter has prepared. I'm sure it will be adorable. Clara took out her iPad, calmly connecting it to the big screen in the living room. I stood beside her, my palms sweaty, but her eyes shone with pride. This video is called, The Most Important Woman in My Life, Clara said clearly. And Grandma is the main character. I looked around and saw Daniel bewildered, not yet understanding what was about to happen. Marjorie leaned back in her chair, her face glowing as she expected to be praised. The first sound in the brightly lit room was not festive music, but Marjorie's voice, clear, sharp, and cruel. Marjorie's wine glass froze in midair, her smile stiffening. Guests looked at each other, some covering their mouths in shock. Daniel sat frozen, his eyes glued to the screen as if he had been slapped awake. Clara stood there, her purple dress flowing to her ankles, her small hand clutching the iPad, her eyes steady like an adult's. I stood behind her, my heart pounding wildly, torn between fear and pride. The screen continued to play more recordings. Marjorie's voice came through loud and clear. If Daniel were smart, he would divorce Rosalind and take Clara to live with me. I'll find him a wife who's worthy, someone who can lift him up instead of dragging him down. A ripple of murmurs spread. A woman near the door whispered, Oh my God, she really said that? Daniel jumped to his feet, not to stop the video but because his legs were trembling. He turned to me, his face pale. Is this real? I looked at him, my voice breaking. This is the truth I've been telling you for years. And now our daughter had to prove it for me. Marjorie shot up, her face pale, then flushed red. This is staged. You two planned this. Traitors. Clara didn't back down. She lifted her head and spoke clearly. It's not staged, Grandma. This is your voice, the words you said when you thought I wasn't listening. I heard everything. I remembered everything. Another clip played. The reflection in the glass cabinet showed Clara sitting on a chair, tears streaming, while Marjorie's voice came from the phone. That girl is pathetic. All she knows is crying for attention. Just like her mother. A heavy sigh came from the crowd. A middle-aged man, an old colleague of Marjorie's, shook his head. I used to think you were just strict. But this... Marjorie trembled, reaching to turn off the screen, but Daniel suddenly stopped her. For the first time in years he stood in front of his mother, his voice hoarse but firm. Mom, that's enough. You're against me too? Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the screen as the final clip played. Marjorie's voice rang out, each word cutting. I'll convince Daniel to file for divorce soon. Clara is still young, she'll forget Rosalind quickly. That child needs a better environment, not that bad blood. I felt every cell in my body trembling, but Clara stood tall, her small face lit by the glow of the screen. She spoke softly, her clear voice echoing in the room. These are the lessons Grandma taught me. I learned that sometimes the ones closest to you can hurt you the most. But I also learned that truth matters more than fear. Some guests wiped away tears. I heard quiet sobs from the corner. Daniel covered his face with his hands, then lowered them, his eyes blazing with something I had never seen in 10 years of marriage. Real anger. He turned to his mother. What have you done? All these years you've poisoned my family. My daughter is 8 years old and she had to record proof herself so that I, her father, would believe you were destroying us. I have been blind. Marjorie screamed. You're being tricked. She's just a child, how could she possibly understand? Clara's voice shook but remained clear. I don't have to understand everything, Grandma. I only have to remember how you hurt me. And I don't want to stay silent anymore. I stepped to Clara's side, holding her hand tightly. Her little hand trembled, but her grip was stronger than any words. I looked straight at Marjorie, no longer afraid for the first time. You taught her the most important lesson, Marjorie. That silence in the face of cruelty is also complicity. And today she chose not to be silent. The guests rose, waves of applause filling the room. They weren't clapping for the chaos, but for the courage of a little girl who dared to tell the truth. Clara bowed slightly, then turned to me whispering, Mom, we did it. Daniel had never cried in front of people before. I was used to him stepping back, choosing silence, letting his mother dominate. But in that moment, in front of relatives, friends, and Marjorie's former colleagues, he broke down. Not a few tears, but a flood after 10 years of suppression. He clutched my hand in Clara's, his voice trembling but ringing out. Mom has controlled this family for too long. And I let it happen. For 10 years I was weak, leaving my wife and daughter to suffer alone. But today I won't stay silent anymore. Daniel drew in a shaky breath, turning to Marjorie, his eyes rimmed with red. From now on you will no longer control this family. If you can't respect Rosalind and Clara, then I'm sorry, you will no longer be allowed in this home. Marjorie leapt up. Her face flushed red, her lips quivering with rage. Daniel, how dare you speak to your mother like that? After everything I've done for you? Daniel squeezed my hand tighter, meeting her eyes without looking away for the first time. I dare. And I should have said it long ago. Marjorie looked around, searching for an ally. But her old friends avoided her gaze, some shaking their heads. They had heard her voice in the video. No one could deny the truth. You'll all regret this, she screamed, her voice hoarse. Finally, she grabbed her purse, her heels striking the wooden floor. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving the room in thick silence. No one stood to see her off. No one said goodbye. After Marjorie left, the air remained taut like a drawn string. Some guests politely gathered their glasses. Others patted Daniel's shoulder, whispering, You did the right thing. Someone looked at me and gave a sad smile, their eyes saying what words could not. I understand what you've been through. Clara still held my hand tightly, her eyes wide. She seemed unable to believe what had just happened. I bent down and kissed her hair. You were so brave, Clara. She nodded slightly. This time Dad stood with us, Mom. That sentence made my throat tighten. Yes, for the first time in 10 years, Daniel truly stood with me and our daughter. When the guests finally left, Only the three of us remained, with strands of decorations still swaying under the lights. Daniel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands, letting out a long breath. "I've made you and Clara suffer too much," he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to apologize enough." I sat beside him, gently placing my hand on his shoulder. "What matters is the choice you made today. Clara needs a father who protects her. I need a husband who stands by me. And you did that." Clara climbed into Daniel's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I forgive you, Dad. But don't stay silent anymore, okay?" Daniel held her tight, tears spilling again. "I promise. No more silence." In the days that followed, I saw a clear change in Daniel. He reached out to a lawyer to secure our family's rights, in case Marjorie tried something reckless. He also went with me to Clara's school, speaking with her teacher to make sure she had the emotional support she needed. Every evening he made time for dinner with us, no excuses about overtime, no slipping away to his mother's house. Once Clara giggled and said, "Dad's like a superhero now, isn't he, Mom? Always here to protect us." I laughed, but my heart warmed to the point of tears. Of course, Marjorie's shadow still lingered. Sometimes I shivered remembering her words in that recording. "I'll convince Daniel to divorce Rosalind. Clara's young, she'll forget soon enough." Those words don't fade easily. But now Daniel had heard them himself, had seen the truth with his own eyes. There was no going back to blindness. One evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Daniel and I sat on the porch. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves rustling in the breeze. He turned to me, his voice heavy. "I don't think Mom will give up. I know her. But I also know who I have to protect now." I thought about the last 10 years, about the times I begged him to speak up while he stayed silent. I thought about Clara, so young yet forced to create her special project to save herself. And I knew his change wasn't easy, but it was necessary. "We'll protect this family together," I said slowly. "This time no one will be left alone." Daniel nodded, his eyes shining with a determination I had never seen before. In that moment it felt like a new door had opened. Outside, Marjorie might still be angry, still looking for ways to strike back. But inside this home we had chosen to let go of fear, to stand together. And that was what mattered most. 6 months passed since that night Marjorie stormed out of our house in fury. In that time it felt like the scattered pieces of my family were slowly being put back together. But not in the old way. They were forming a new shape, stronger and clearer. Claire, my daughter, changed the most. She was no longer the little girl who lowered her head whenever her grandmother criticized her. Now she walked into school with confidence, clutching her backpack, smiling at her friends. At a parent-teacher meeting, her teacher told me, "Rosalind, your daughter has truly inspired the whole class." She created the Kindness Watch Club, encouraging her classmates to record acts of kindness every day instead of mean ones. The kids are so excited they submit piles of kindness reports each week. I smiled, pride swelling in me. The 8-year-old who once secretly recorded cruel words to protect her mother had turned pain into strength, teaching her peers to value kindness. Even a local newspaper ran a story about her, calling her the small voice of justice. When I showed Clara the article, she blushed and whispered, "Mom, I don't want to be famous. I just want my friends to know that kind words are as important as good grades." I hugged her, relief and emotion flooding me. Daniel changed too. I once thought he would never face his old wounds. But one day he sat at the kitchen table, took my hand and said, "I want to go to therapy. I need to learn how to set boundaries so I'm no longer the weak husband and father I used to be." Looking into his eyes, I no longer saw weariness but determination. From that day on, every Thursday afternoon he left work early to meet with a therapist. At first he was hesitant, holding back. But gradually he began speaking about what he had kept buried his entire life. One evening after his 10th session, he sat beside me on the porch, his voice low but lighter. "I realized I've lived in my mother's shadow too long. Since I was a boy, she taught me that silence was the only way to keep peace. But silence doesn't protect anyone. I have to relearn how to use my own voice. What matters is that you're learning. And Clara sees you trying. For her, that's enough." Daniel began changing at work as well. He refused to work overtime on weekends and for the first time told his boss, "I have a family that needs me." When he told me about it, his eyes lit up as if he had finally reclaimed the part of himself he had lost years ago. As for me, after years of standing in a classroom feeling dismissed, I felt a new life within me. The principal called me into her office and announced I was being promoted to head of the English department. She smiled. We need someone not only skilled but also someone who empowers students. And I see you do that every day. I walked out of her office under the crimson autumn maples, my heart racing. For so long I had lived under whispers that I was just a teacher, that my work meant nothing. But in that moment I knew I had found my worth again. Dinner in our home was different now. No more scolding words making a child shrink, no more heavy glares from Marjorie. Instead, laughter filled the room when Daniel told a clumsy story from work, or when Clara eagerly shared her latest kindness report. Once, while clearing the table, Clara looked up and asked, "Mom, do we still have to worry about Grandma coming back?" I hesitated, then bent to meet her eyes. "She might come back, Clara. But we don't have to be afraid anymore. Because we have each other." Clara smiled, ran to hug Daniel and whispered, "I think our family is stronger than anyone outside." Daniel hugged her, his eyes misting. Still, I knew Marjorie hadn't truly disappeared. Sometimes an envelope arrived, filled with harsh words written in her stern hand. The first time I received one, I trembled as I handed it to Daniel. He skimmed it, then tore the paper in half and tossed it into the trash. "You don't need to worry anymore. Her words have no power here." I was stunned. That was not the Daniel of before. But it was the Daniel I needed. The Daniel Clara needed. One weekend evening, the three of us sat in the living room. Clara was gluing colored papers into her kindness wall poster to take to class. Daniel sat beside her, straightening the pieces. I watched them, a strange peace washing over me. I suddenly remembered the image from a year ago. Clara curled over the piano, tears falling onto the keys as her grandmother yelled. That memory haunted me, kept me awake night after night. And now here was Clara, with the same bright eyes, but this time she had learned to stand up, to speak truth, to build a small community of kindness for her friends. Maybe that was real healing. One quiet early winter evening, as snow drifted outside, Clara sat at her desk, tapping her pencil on her diary. She looked at me for a long moment, then asked, her voice hesitant but thoughtful, "Mom, if one day Grandma came back and apologized, would we forgive her?" The question left me still. I set down my book, sat beside her, and wrapped my arm around her small shoulders. I saw in her eyes not fear anymore, but the honest curiosity of a child who had seen too much. "Clara, forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again," I said softly, slowly, so she could feel each word. "Forgiveness is opening your heart to let go of anger, but it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. Someday she truly changes, we can open our hearts. But until then, our duty is to protect each other." Clara tilted her head, thinking, then nodded. She wrote on a new page. I peeked and saw the shaky but firm words, "Truth makes me strong. But love is what keeps me whole." I kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you, Clara." Clara's 9th birthday drew near. This time we didn't plan anything grand. Just a small cake, a few close school friends, and our warm kitchen. I spent the afternoon making a chocolate cake from my mother's recipe, while Clara decorated it with colorful candies. Daniel hung little string lights in the window, his face relaxed, free from the tension of years past. "What do you want to wish for?" I asked as we set the cake on the table, the candles flickering on the smooth frosting. Clara rested her chin on her hands, thought for a moment, then grinned. "I wish our family always stays like this." I touched her hand lightly. "That's not something to wish for anymore, Clara. That's something we're already keeping together." Daniel sat beside her, resting his hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, I promise from now on, I'll never let anyone make us bow our heads." Clara's eyes sparkled in the candlelight. She closed her eyes and blew out the candles. White smoke curled up into the warm air. Her friends cheered, their voices filling the room with joy and belonging. Later that night, after the little party ended, I cleaned the kitchen. Clara curled on the sofa with her diary, scribbling a few more lines. I watched her quietly, then turned to Daniel and whispered, "Do you see it? She's found her smile again." Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening. "And so have we. I've never felt this house so peaceful." I smiled softly, feeling as though a new door was opening. No more outsiders imposing their will, no more heavy silences. Only laughter, gentle light, and the faith that, no matter the past, my little family had found our own path. Clara looked up and grinned. "Mom, I finished writing. Today I wrote. On my 9th birthday, I had cake, friends, and my parents. No one can take that away anymore. The painful journey we endured wasn't about exposing a truth. It was about learning to cherish simple happiness, to be strong while still holding on to kindness. As I held Claire in my arms that night, I realized, maybe in life, everyone must face wounds from family, the place that should have been safest of all. But sometimes from those wounds we learn to grow, to protect ourselves and those we love. I share this story not only to speak of pain but to remind us, truth carries the power to heal and kindness is what keeps us standing. If one day you face control or cruel words from those closest to you, will you choose silence? Or will you dare to speak out to protect your happiness? Tell me your thoughts in the comments because every story has its own perspective and I truly want to hear yours. And if you'd like to continue walking with me, sharing and finding strength in family stories, don't forget to like and follow the channel. In the episodes ahead, we'll share more stories that touch the heart, reminding us that while family can hurt us, it's also where we discover the true meaning of love and courage.